I got there, and the first day we lost an F-4. Coming into land, it just disappeared in broken clouds. We were searching for 3 days to find him. We had Army helping us and everything, and this Mohawk pilot said, if we search before the 3 days are up, we'll never find it in the jungle. He said, at 3 days, go to the dead tree. And the trees were 250 foot high. He said, you'll go to the dead tree, and that's how we found it. There was all this green and one brown tree. I'm Dick Van Allen. I grew up in a little town in northern Ohio, Willard, Ohio. And from the time I was about 7, a neighbor lady's son flew a B-24 on the way overseas. And he was about, to me, it looked like he was on treetop, but probably 200-300 feet in a B-24. And I, as a little boy, decided I wanted to fly. And from then on, I had tunnel vision. I took high school and college courses just to get me through pilot training. I didn't care about score. All I wanted was to get to pilot training, and that comes later. But
did you have to have a college degree to be a pilot, man?
Well, to get commissioned. You could be a cadet, but that was going out. My class had the last cadets. Hey,
take me back, though. You're 7. Do you know that guy's going to fly the plane over his mom's house? Or did you?
No, I didn't.
Were you just outside playing?
I was just outside, and this thing came up our street and looked like he was going to hit the trees, and I thought, that really looks like fun. Well, anyway, about when I was 12, they came out with a movie called Fighter Pilot, and it said, fighter pilots should not be married because they'll be too conservative. And I thought, okay, I will not get married till I get my wings. And that just kind of was in the background. And I did avoid any serious things. I dated everybody, but I never got serious over anybody, even after I got out of college, until I got my wings. That was what I wanted, and I had tunnel vision again.
Where'd you go to college?
A little college in Ohio, in Westerville, Ohio. It's Otterbein College. Ohio at that time had 6 state universities and 50 church-started colleges, and that was one of them. But anyway, when I graduated from high school, I took chemistry and math, double major, because I thought it was the easiest way for me to get through college.
That's funny. Chemistry and math, the 2 hardest things in college.
Well, yeah, I was in a group of my chem class. We were all together because it was a small school. There's about 16 or 18 pre-meds and me. And they always wanted me to go somewhere else because I raised the curve, they said. And they just didn't understand. I wanted to fly and not be a doctor, but I didn't care for that at all.
If you or someone you know isn't getting the VA benefits you've earned, click the link in our description. We've teamed up with a group of experts that help veterans build stronger VA claims and get the benefits they deserve. Click the link in our description for a free consultation.
After graduation, 2 days before we graduated, the Air Force canceled all pilot training orders for that year.
And what year was that?
1957. And they said we had to sign a new contract. And we said, okay, if we sign the contract, do we keep our same class dates? Because guys had...
Had you signed up already at this point?
Yeah. And I was supposed to go for 9 months with a chemical company as a trainee, and then I would go to pilot training. They told us no. They would let us know when we were wanted. And that was the first part of June. I heard after Thanksgiving that I was going in at the end of February.
Were you disappointed when all that happened? Did you think that was going to ruin your chances?
We were disappointed for a day or two, but my little town was a railroad town. And at that time, they wanted firemen on the Baltimore and Ohio Railroad for steam engines and diesels. And so I volunteered there and actually ended making 3 times what I made when I went in the Air Force to learn to fly. And I got my own time. We just signed up and flew what we called ran what we called the extra board. I worked that until the month before I went to fly. And at that point, we went to a class at San Antonio at Lackland Air Force Base, and it was called Officers Pre-Flight. And we started our records and went to the altitude chamber and all this. We had 2 weeks of troop duty, and which they didn't let us do anything because we would have screwed them up. We just got to watch and go away and play pool. But anyway...
Was it like a normal boot camp? Were they yelling at you and stuff, or no?
Well, everybody did it, and we ended up there. I got the measles while I was there. I didn't know you could get the measles twice, but they had a measles epidemic, and lucky me, I got them. And they had such a large group there. At that time, they had like 30,000 airmen going through, and then we had 600 in our class of pre-flight. And a bunch of us got measles, but I don't know how many. But anyway, I ended up 2 weeks in the hospital and felt perfectly fine. So I was the only officer with 23 enlisted, new airmen and a cadet and an Indonesian first lieutenant. We were the only officers. And
you mean in the hospital?
Yeah.
Was it a big open hospital like you see in the movies or no?
Well, that was because they'd had everything. When I decided I had the measles, I went to the brand new one at Lackland, and some full colonel come in and said, "Yep, you got the measles. We'll be right back." And it was about 2 hours later, they came back and said, he apologized. He said, "I'm sorry, but all of our private rooms are full. You'll have to go on a ward." And I said, so what? And I said, okay. And so we went out, and I was in this ward with those guys, and a sergeant who was running the ward said, "Okay, you got to mop the floor." And I said, "I don't think so." And he kind of looked at me because all we had was hospital
gowns,
pajamas, and then in comes this full colonel, and he starts lecturing him on military customs and courtesies. And I thought, do they do this everywhere? And, it was kind of weird. And he talked for about 15 minutes, and he said, "Would Lieutenant Van Allen step out so we know who he is?" And I did, and everybody kind of looked at me like I had the plague. And when he left, all the beds went like this. They moved away. and then they wanted me to be an advisor on what tech schools they ought to go to. And I had no idea what a tech school was. I'd been in the Air Force 2 weeks, about as long as they had. But anyway, I lived through that, and then they said, get your assignments. Back then, pilot training was civilian contract for about 6 months, and then military jet training of about 8 months. And so anyway, they lined us all up, and there were 6 training bases, 2 of which were the brand new T-37 jet trainer, and everybody wanted to go there. Or there were 2 that were in nice areas. One was in Florida, and I forget where the other one was, but there were 2 that nobody wanted to go to. And I didn't get the one nobody wanted to go to, but I went to one that was still flying propeller. We had the last class of propeller aircraft, the T-28. And anyway...
Where was that at?
Moultrie, Georgia. And I walked up and he said, "You're going to Spence Air Base, Moultrie, Georgia." And this captain looked at me and said, "You got an awful blank look on your face. Do you know where that is?" And I had said, "I have no idea." He said, "Idea-wise, it's about 80 miles north of Tallahassee, Florida." And so off we went to Moultrie, Georgia. It was still in the Old South tradition. It had a square in the middle of town, and the Ku Klux Klan had their meeting fully dressed every other Saturday night in the town. And that was something I'd never seen in Ohio. And it was kind of novel, and all of this went on, and we were learning to fly, and we were there. We got 30 hours in the T-34, and...
How'd you like that?
It was like a big beach bonanza with a standard tail. There's a model in there. But anyway, then we got 70 hours in the T-28, which was very similar to what I always wanted to fly. I wanted to fly a Thunderbolt, which was gone by the time I got to pilot training. But it was a big recip engine trainer, two people in tandem, and but it didn't have a very noteworthy engine. I ended up with 2 engine failures going through pilot training, but it was luckily at the end, and we were a holdover program. They said they were lengthening the runways at several bases because they were getting jets. And so they asked the bachelors to fly for 33 hours, no grades, no classes. We just flew and then went back and did whatever we want. And so we'd fly 1 period a day, and that seemed like really something to do.
How many hours would you be in a plane before you?
Well, we'd be in them 1.5 to 3 hours, depending on how they scheduled it. And we were about 2 weeks into that program when the engine quit.
What did you do?
Well, I was at 10,000 feet, and I blew the canopy open and thought, here we go. We get to practice parachute, which I was not looking forward to. And I looked over the side of the airplane because that one did not have an ejection seat. It was the last ones built without it. And I was over the Okefenokee swamp in Georgia, and I thought, there are alligators down there. I don't want to go down there. And I shut the canopy, and that made us not descend 1,500 feet a minute better. And I glided to a town in Tifton, Georgia, to an abandoned auxiliary, put the gear down, and landed. And back then, I didn't think anything about it because that was a procedure we practiced all the time, was simulated forced landings. And until I rolled, well, actually, I landed short because I had to dive under an Indonesian student who was trying to solo or wash out. And they kept telling him, break out, we got an emergency. And he's right at my altitude as I'm coming around base leg. So I'm looking over the wing, trying to see where he's at. And I think he would have hit me. He was so fixed on what he was doing. And so I had to dive under him. I landed in the grass before the runway, rolled up on the runway, and I was parked there. And somebody knocked on the canopy. It was a fireman. He said, can we help you out? And I said, in a few minutes. And that was my first emergency. And then I flew the second time. I landed at the home field, and it was like old hat because I'd already done it once. And
was flying everything you thought it was going to be? You wanted to since you were 7.
Back then, we had no radar control. When we took off as a solo, they didn't know where we went for 3 hours. We just went out and had fun playing tag and in and out of clouds, and we simulated we were fighter pilots. And anyway, somehow we got through without getting killed, and we were all bulletproof. So we got graduated, and I went to Selma, Alabama, of all places, next as jet training. And in jet training, since we were coming out of Propeller, they gave us what we called a dollar ride. The instructor flew it and just showed us what it could do. And he got to play with it. And then, of course, eventually I got in training and did the same thing. But anyway, we taxied out in the T-33. It was a single-engine jet. Went to 100% power, went down the runway, just broke ground, sucked the gear up, and he went, oh, look at that. And I thought, what? I'm sitting in the front of this airplane going 160 mile an hour and never have been there before. And I thought it was another airplane. He said, no, look at the fuel pressure. And I thought, where's that at? And I finally found it, and the needle was going like this. He said, we may have an engine fire and a broken fuel line. I'm going to stop cock it on downwind, and I'm shutting off the radios. And then we yelled back and forth. And he said, when we get on down, and he pulled it up, upside down, rolled out, and he said, punch off the tip tanks. And so I got to make the tip tanks disappear and punched them off. And he said, we're going to land. When we touch down, open the canopy. Well, the T-bird canopy came up, and you had a limit. Don't open it over 90 miles an hour. It may come off. It wasn't guaranteed to stay with the airplane. And I thought, oh boy. Well, the other thing was, in the T-33, you flew airspeeds and fuel weights. And since we were full of fuel, you added 5 knots of airspeed to every, 100 gallons of fuel. We had 800 gallons. So you added 40 mile an hour on final to 120 we were already coming in at. And he said, well, as soon as we touch down, open the canopy. Well, the other thing I had not thought about is back then, the barrier was a nylon webbing across at the end of the runway, and you drug an anchor chain. And it worked very well because we drug 300 feet of it. We used all the runway, ran off the runway, and of course, when I opened the canopy, everything went out. Pencils, paper, forms, dirt, everything just went out. And finally, the airplane stopped, and I thought, boy, that was my first jet flight, and it was 5 minutes long. I don't think I'm going to like this. And I was sitting there looking around and looked out, and my instructor's about 100 yards away, already out of the airplane, and signaling with this guy for me to get out. Well, I ended up the safety officer. So anyway, in the T-33, the front seat has to have a ladder. There's nothing up there but nose. And so I thought, well, I better get out. So I went to get out, and I forgot I was still plugged in, so I had to unplug my microphone and headset and got out, and I realized there was no place for my feet. So I slid down the side of the nose and landed on the safety officer, and I hear I'd forgotten to take off my parachute. I still had a parachute on, too. But that was my initial ride in jet planes, and I wasn't sure I was going to like that. It ended up a fun airplane, easy and smooth. We learned to fly formation, combat trail, a little bit of everything. Towards the end of pilot training, my last flights in formation, I had another close call. We took on a student who'd broken his arm playing football, and so he washed back 2 classes of 6 weeks. So he hadn't flown in 12 weeks, and we were in formation, and that's where he was. So we got him, and we went up. He was the dual ship lead. I was number 2 solo. Number 3 was a dual, and 4 was solo. So we went to fly formation, and in formation, you never made a radio call. You did everything with hand signals. And that was part of the training. Well, anyway, they had me on the wing, and I've got movies of it, of me sitting there, and the instructor said, rejoin to normal. We were in 4-ship fingertip, and I was to drop down, slide back, and come up on the other side of the lead's wing. Well, he rolled in, and the way you signaled when to do it is you just tap the wing. You just saw it wiggle. Well, Art had forgotten the signals, and he rolled into a 45-degree bank, and at that point, everybody was rolled in with him, and he rolled back. And I was looking at the floor of lead, and they always told us you can't move the rudder because there was no hydraulic pressure above 300 knots. Yes, you can if you're scared. I jammed the rudder in and slid down. My tip tank went between his tip tank and the fuselage. And they always told us, if you get way under, don't look up, just dive. And so I did. We were somewhere around 30-some thousand feet. And when I recovered, I was at 2. And almost instantly, Bill called the lead, and he's my instructor, and he said, 2, where are you? And I said, I'm under you. How far? And I said, you guys look real small. And so then I got movies of me coming back in to rejoin, and I was all over because I didn't want to go through that one more time. I figured that was my one shot of living. But that's the way pilot training went. They always told us in World War II, they killed 6,000 pilots in training. That's just pilots, not navigators, bombardiers, or anything else. Just pilots, which is almost a couple of thousand a year.
That's pretty sobering.
Yeah. So we lost. The class ahead of us lost 6 people. We lost 2 in our class to accidents and fatal accidents. And at that point, I began to realize the wives' problems. When we'd have a fatal accident, we would lose several guys the wives would want out. And so we went there. So that was one thing. Fighter pilots didn't want to be married. But anyway.
But you were still loving it.
Yeah, I loved it. Yeah. It was formation and in trail, trying to stay with the guy, and you were trying to shake him off. We were pulling 8 Gs, and it did not have a G suit. The airplane wasn't fitted for that. So you squatted down, and my instructor was tall and skinny, so he would black out before I did. And you get what we call gun barrel vision. You can actually close down the aperture, be awake, and if you continue to pull Gs, it'll close up and you're wide awake. And then you pass out. That's the next step. But anyway, Bill would always get gun barrel vision before I did. And so whenever we went in trail chasing each other, all he'd say is, don't hit him, don't hit him.
How long would you be blacked out for? Just a second?
Oh,
till you quit pulling the Gs?
If you kept doing the same maneuver, as long as you're pulling those Gs. So, but the airplane would start decaying after a while if you're pulling 8 Gs. So it could be 5 seconds, something like that.
That's spooky, man.
And what was weird was when you're looking gun back, you have no peripheral vision, just a little tunnel. And if you pull any more Gs, that closes.
Wow.
So you flew with it to chase the other guy to make sure he didn't get away. And that was part of pilot training. Then they came down and said, my instructor had a friend in assignments at Randall, and he said, 75% of your class are going to B-47s, back seat, 5 years.
And describe the B-47.
It was a 6-engine SAC, the first swept-wing jet bomber, but it was in tandem, so the pilot sat in front and the co-pilot sat in the back, where you couldn't see much and you couldn't do much. You were also the gunner. You could turn your seat around and run the tail gun. That was part of your job, probably in combat more than anything else. But I thought, I don't want to go in an airplane and sit in the back seat for 5 years. And so I told my instructor, I don't want to go to B-47s. And I thought I was going to go fighters first, and then fighters were deteriorating assignments. And so I thought maybe I'd go to 4-engine cargo. And he said, you put that down and you'll get B-47s for sure. And back then, not only you volunteered, but they would send a block of assignments and you went class standing. Well, the two of us were tied for the top of the class, and we both put in for helicopters to avoid the B-47. Jimmy's wife was from South Carolina, and I eventually married a girl from Florida, Central Florida. But anyway, that comes later. But we flipped a coin, and I went to Cheyenne and had no idea other than I was going to fly a new turbine helicopter, the first one the Air Force had, the H-43B. And so the assignments came down, and we thought, we better go look at these helicopters. Well, there were still recip at the base we were. And we thought, my God, what have we done? Why are we in this? And so we went
what made you say that? Why?
Yeah. And so we went to Reno, and that's where helicopter school was. Well, before Reno, like I said, we were in the holdover program, and I had not gotten serious because I did not want anything to spoil my pilot training. Well, I met the wife I was going to have while we were in Moultrie. We only flew in the holdover program in the morning, and then we had the rest of the day and the evening off. Well, our instructor said, are you going to go down to see the girls at Florida State? We said, what girls? Oh, little did I know, Florida State had just become a men's school, too. It had always been a girls' teacher school back. And so the ratio was about 3 girls to every guy at Florida State back then. Well, Bob, my roommate, had a friend at Florida State belonging to a fraternity, and he said, you come down and my girl will fix you up with dates. And so we said, yeah, that sounds like a good idea. And so we went down the first time, and was sorority. She was the vice president, the girl he was pinned to. And so we thought, yeah, we'll go to Alpha Z and see what kind of girls are there. And so we went over, and the gal was nicknamed Tiger, and Tiger would say, which girls you want to date? And we said, oh, those two look pretty good. And we did this about 3 times and kind of became notorious as fly-by-nights. Anyway, the 4th time we went down, they said, the girls are all dressing for a concert. They had to sing. And so here came 35 or 40 sorority girls in formals, and were going to sing for us. And we're sitting on the couch picking out dates. And it looked like a good plan for a while. Well, then I had a brand new Plymouth convertible back then. Top was down, and they needed rides. I ended up with 9 girls in my car. I was in the back seat with a girl sitting on my lap, and my roommate's date was driving my car. I can't remember all of how we got there, but anyway, my future wife was on my lap, and so I got to talk to her. And at that point, I told Tiger, gee, I'd like to date Harriet. And so things got serious from then, and she was the one that pinned on my wings. So I did stay single till I got my wings. And that was about it. Right after helicopter school, I drove from Reno to Florida to get married. And then we went to Cheyenne, Wyoming in the dead of winter. And my wife had never seen snow. And she got to see a lot of it go by the window. It just goes by horizontal there. But that was the beginning of my career in the Air Force.
How was helicopter school? How was that different from what was so different about that from flying the jets?
Well, one day we were in Reno, and the runway was 6,000 feet. We had Igor Sikorsky come to a formal, what we called a dining in, a formal dinner. And he said, "You gentlemen are crazy." And a real broken accent. Well, we kind of looked at him like, "Oh, yeah?" And he said, "I didn't make this machine to go above 3,000 feet. Well, we were sitting at 6 and going to 10 for practice. And we thought, why are we doing this?" And the helicopter, when you learn to fly it, once it becomes after about 10 hours, it's kind of like we're learning to roller skate. Eventually, you don't think, you just skate. Well, the helicopter, once you get slightly used to it, you think, I'm going to put it over there, and it just moves over there. Almost no control movements, but that helicopter had no RPM control, no hydraulics to speak of.
What helicopter was it?
It was a Sikorsky H-55, which was, or S-55, which was an H-19B. The cyclic, or the central control for the rotor system, had as much feel as if you tie a rope to the ceiling of the airplane. Had no aerodynamic center like an airplane. You just, if you moved it fraction, it moved. And you had no feel. You just had to make sure you didn't move it too far or too fast. The collective, which controlled vertical lift, had a motorcycle throttle, spring-loaded closed, and you had to hold it open to maintain RPM. And whenever you changed any control, you changed them all, which also you had to add power for RPM. So that was there. It was downloaded 25 pounds. So it was, you were holding 25 pounds up, spring-loaded open.
The whole time you were flying?
Yes. And there was no boost in the rudders. And if you're hovering, you're standing on the left rudder. It's just...
So it was both hands, both feet?
And all your fingers. Because you had all the radios, all the RPM, all the landing and searchlights, the rescue hoist. The pilot could control that too, although you normally had a hoist operator.
So it was like you were connected to the thing.
Oh, yeah.
It was just an extension of your arms and legs.
Of your, and like I said, you didn't physically, like a fixed wing, you add power, you get down the runway so fast, you raise the nose and it climbs out, you pull up the gear, so you do the one at a time. These, if you move any one, you got to move all of them to compensate for loss of lift or...
Did you like that?
Well, it was very difficult and humbling. The first 10 hours were the most frustrating I've ever had in my life. After that, you were born to it. And you never thought about it. I'm going here or there. And you knew what to do to get there.
Was that the copter that was grossly underpowered then, that one?
It was a recip engine, a Wright engine. It had 700 horsepower, weighed 1,600 pounds. The turbines that came after that weighed about 200 pounds apiece and would give you 1,000 to 2,000 horsepower. So, and they did not lose much power going up, where recip decayed real fast. So you were very power limited in it. In the turbine ones, the limiting factor, usually the tail rotor control. The air gets so thin and you're pulling power, and that compensates for torque, that you just run out of rudder and you can't go any higher.
That was the Huey. Was that the one with the turbine?
Yeah, I flew about 5 models of the Huey, 2 of them in the Air Force, a lot. I've got about 6,500 hours in the Hueys and 1,500 in H-43s and 1,500 in the H-19, and then the rest fixed wing time. We flew fixed wing indiscriminately, I guess.
When you were in Cheyenne as well?
Well, and if you were at a base, once you flew your helicopter time you could fly what was at the base too.
Oh, that's fun.
So you could bootleg time, or they assigned us. As Cheyenne, we had 2 different recip twin engines, and we flew as co-pilots. The base at Cheyenne was really strange. We did the first missile helicopter test to support Atlas and Titan. But then they also were training the new wing commanders. Normally a base would have 1 bird colonel, maybe 2. We had 29. They were trained. So somebody had to fly co-pilot with all these guys to get their time. And so that was us. We were flying with these World War II pilots, which was sometimes scary. Sometimes they were very good.
Okay. How did you end up in Vietnam? What's that story?
Well, I was in Strategic Air Command, and we had 80 pilots and in the SAC, and they rotated us around because they were waiting on the new turbine helicopter. So they were trying to hang on to us. So they moved us every year. I moved 7 times in 7 years. So every May, we knew we were going to move in June, because that was before the Air Force could do it. Anyway, I was at Ellsworth and just checked out in the Huey, and I had about 1,000 hours in the F model. And they said, we've got a special project going in Vietnam, and we're going to take 13 of SAC's. They must have had 40 helicopters, and they were taking 7 of our 13 and mechanics, and they were going to take 26 pilots. And I went home and told my wife, I'm going to volunteer because I know I'm going to go. I might as well go with somebody I know, airplanes I know, and maintenance I know. And so volunteered, was going to a Special Ops Squadron, the 20th SOS. And
what year is this?
1966. We had armed helicopters, which were the only ones in the Air Force, and found out later it was kind of a, trying to think of the word, but anyway, off-the-wall kind of unit.
What do you mean by that?
We had no insignias. We put in spies, and picked them up in Thailand and Laos and Cambodia. And instead of stars on the tail boom, we had a silhouette of a Green Hornet. That was our call sign, Hornet.
And what copters were you flying over there at the time?
F-model Huey to start with. Then the end came along with twin engine. But we were, to put people in, we would fly 2 slicks and 2 gunships. The gunship consisted of 2 Gatling guns, 1 in each door, pintle mounted. So we had gunners, but the pilot could fix them forward and fire. And then we had 2 rocket pods, which were 18 shots each, as opposed to the Army's 9, because we had much more horsepower. And so we were selected to do this mission. So we would fly.
Before we get into that, back up just a little bit. Get me going over. How did you actually go over to Vietnam?
How did I go?
Yeah. What did you fly in over there to get over there?
Well, I flew in, what airline?
Were you on a commercial one? Was it, it Tiger Air? Or?
Yeah, it was. I flew Flying Tiger home. Okay. And that was really good. I flew like American or something, and we flew to Philippines and then went to jungle survival in the Philippines.
Oh, that was a little training program there?
Yes.
What happened there?
Well, they lectured us on all the different plants and this, and they said, you're going where some people are still cannibals. And we thought, what? But anyway, I knew the NCO that ran the school because he had been our instructor when I went through basic survival before helicopter school. That was like 5 years. Anyway, it was interesting. They had all kinds of snakes, and they said like survival rate on a king cobra is this and this. And then they went to the...
What, you mean if you get bit by a king cobra?
Yeah. And we had them at Takhli, 15 feet long, but neither I. But anyway, this bamboo viper, and they had unknown. And I said, Sarge, don't you have any data? And he said, we have a lot of data, but no survivors. He said, I didn't want to put 0, so I put unknown. And I got to meet them several times up close and highly respected. But anyway, the bamboo viper was the worst. We finished jungle survival, and we were going to catch a 1:30 to Cam Ranh Bay, which is where my orders read, but I found out later I'd supposed to go to Saigon to get assigned, but my orders didn't say that, so I was headed for Cam Ranh Bay. Anyway, it took us 3 nights to get there. The bird took off at midnight. The first one had engine de-icing problems and the system, and so it aborted. And so me and this other guy went back to bed in a motel, and he got up and had supper and started over again. The next one backed into the other and tore the stabilizer up. So the next night we went back, and he shows up later in my career, but I didn't recognize him till later. And the third time we finally got took off, we landed at Cam Ranh just at daylight at a 1:30. They didn't even stop. They just lowered the ramp door, and I stepped off with my luggage, and the sergeant said, sir, have a good year. And they taxied back out and took off. And I was standing on the ramp thinking, I guess this is where the war starts.
What did you think of that place? What was your impression?
It was horrible. And we had one paved road in the whole base, and it went to the Army unit at South Beach. Everything else was red laterite, which is like red clay, and red dust everywhere, sand a half inch on top of the food in the dining hall, literally. And you dug underneath the sand to get food without sand. And Cameron was something else. Well, I had been stationed on an island in Texas, and the commanding general came in, and he shows up at Cameron. But anyway, General John Ryan, he was 2nd Air Force commander, and I was on this island for 2 hours, and we only had 6 officers, and 5 of them went back on the boat. We all flew over on the helicopter, and then they went to meetings on the mainland, and I was the only one on the island, only officer and 400 airmen. And the tower called and said, I've got this T-33 in the pitch. Where do you want to park him? And I said, where'd he come from? And the guy said, I don't know. I don't have a flight plan. Well, in SAC, you were leery that LeMay was going to tear your base apart, but it's only a 2-place airplane, so it couldn't be much of an inspection. So they parked. I said, I'll meet the airplane. I walked up, and this gentleman was in the front. No rank, no name tags, nothing. And he gray hair and steely blue eyes. I never will forget his eyes. And he had a major in the back, so I figured he's either a colonel or a general because he's got an IP protecting him. So anyway, I found out later, yeah. But anyway, he taxied up, opened the canopy, and I said, what can I do for you? And he said, who are you? Like, I should know him. And I said, well, I'm the new helicopter pilot, and I've been here 2 hours. And he said, you're Van Allen. And I thought, who are you that knows my name, and I've only been here 2 hours? And he said, let me congratulate you for putting on your railroad tracks, your captain's bars, which I put on that day. He knew that much about me, and I didn't know a thing about him. He reached up on the glare shield to get his hat, had 3 stars on it. And I thought, I'm dead. Well, later in Cameron, the food was so bad, what they called PACAV, Pacific Air Force commander, 4-star general came in. Same general, John D. Ryan. And we had been out all day on Thanksgiving Day on a bird that we lost and looking for.
This is at Cameron.
Yeah. Looking for pilots and hadn't found any yet.
So you saw that same guy again in Cameron?
Well, yeah. Well, we walked into the dining hall and the food was as bad as usual. And the dining officer come out and said, you're going to have to eat rations. The general's party has got the club locked up. And when you tell fighter pilots you're going to eat cold rations on Thanksgiving, that did not go down well. They made it known that they didn't like that and were cussing and swearing and yelling. And here, these room dividers that are like 5 feet tall, here came General Ryan around the corner, and he always called my first name. I flew him duck hunting, goose hunting, deer hunting, whatever on the island. But anyway, He said, Dick, what's going on? And I said, well, sir, they just told us that we're going to eat cold rations. He said, where have you been? And we said, on a shoot down, and we've been out all day looking for pilots. My people will eat the cold rations. The combat crew eats steak. And boy, we ate that steak and got out of there fast. We didn't say boo. We just left. And that was the only steak I ever got at Camp Ranh. But General Ryan eventually ended up at Moses Lake. I met him again, and he ended up chief of staff of the military. And strangely enough, his son did the same thing about 20 years later. But he was the finest gentleman I ever knew. He was the one general, and we saw probably 40 of them at Matagorda, and he never lost his temper. He was even-tempered, and he knew everything that was going on. I don't know how he did it. He had a memory like Trump. He knew everything that was going on in his command, and you found out, but he never raised his voice. He just, matter of fact, the finest man I've ever worked for. And but he ended up in my life 3 or 4 times.
Well, that's a cool story. Okay, you land in Cam Ranh. What's your first assignment? Do you remember the first thing you did?
Yes, we had we lost a number 4 F4.
Hold on, just for the audience, explain what your assignment's going to be over there.
Well, I got there, and the first day we lost an F4. Coming into land, it just disappeared in broken clouds. And we were searching for 3 days to find him. And we had Army helping us and everything. And this Mohawk pilot said, if we search before the 3 days are up, we'll never find it in the jungle. He said, at 3 days, go to the dead tree. He said, the airplane will crash and kill a tree. And the trees were 250 foot high. And so he said, you'll go to the dead tree and your crash will be blind. And that's how we found it. On the 3rd afternoon, there was all this green and 1 brown tree. And how he got over there, I never knew. He was 20 miles from the base. And they would come in formation, flew into a cloud, and he didn't come out.
Tell me, who all's on your helicopter? What's your helicopter?
Okay, well, we have, at that time, we didn't have a full complement of PJs, but we would have 2 medics, a hoist operator, a pilot, and a co-pilot. And then if you were searching, maybe 2 volunteer scanners looking for. Anyway, once we found the crash, I was the bird that was going to go up and bring it. Actually, we were taking Green Berets in. I had 6 Nungs, 2 Green Berets. Nungs are Chinese mercenaries that were soldiers. And we had 2 Green Berets. What you did, we were going to put them down into the crash scene. So you would have the tree penetrator sitting in the door with some slack, and then you would lift the survivor or the individual going down and out the door and run him down. The crew chief briefed him and got him on the penetrator and got ready to swing him out the door. And the Green Beret jumped out the door with the tree penetrator and slack cable. When it come to the end, it snapped the latch on the safety cable, and he fell into the crash lane, which was shredded trees and everything else to metal. He had a compound fracture of one leg, and he came up on the radio in probably 30 seconds. I've given myself a morphine and this, and he's talking like he's working on somebody, but it was him. The only problem is he broke our hoist, so we did not have a penetrator or a hook. So we backed off, and the high bird came in and picked him up.
What's a high bird?
Well, there it wasn't too high because we knew there were no guns around. He was probably a couple thousand feet.
Is that another Huey, or what is it?
Yeah, another 43 at that time. And so they went in and picked him up and brought him out and took him to the hospital. But so that kind of stopped. Then we had one of the Army radios. We were listening to the Army talking to their other people. And once we got people down there, they had put up a perimeter, and they said, we got people coming in and surrendering, and there's so many, it's going to crowd us out of our perimeter and into the jungle. And we thought, what's going on? Well, what we found out was that mountain, the natives were held prisoner on the mountain and farmed, and the VC took all their food. So anyway, the Army decided we were going to move all of the people out that wanted to leave, and all of their livestock, pigs, chickens, you name it, we had it. And the Army even brought a Chinook in to take out cows. But anyway.
So you would land your copter and load those people up?
Yeah, and then at that point, they said, okay, you've got enough experience. You're getting a check ride for a rescue crew commander. I had never been in rescue, had no idea what they did as far as regulations. And I said, okay. And they said, you're leaving tonight. You're going to get a check ride at 8 o'clock tonight, which was dark. And you weren't supposed to do emergency procedures at night, but they didn't care. And we, then I got on a 1:30 that night at midnight and flew to Thailand. They said, you're going to Takhli. And where's that? I had never heard of it. And they said, well, you'll hear of it tomorrow because you'll be there. Then I tried to call it, and our own system of things have kept secret. Every switchboard in Vietnam had a duck name. Yeah, like one of them was pintail, and Takhli was pintail. One was mallard, one was wood duck, and so I tried to call Takhli, and this little Oriental voice would say, Mallard. And I said, no, I want Takhli. Mallard. And I didn't know why she was saying Mallard. I thought, who in the world do I have? Well, it ended up, that was a secret call for, it's one of our own security things that nobody knew what was going on. But anyway, I got there at 8 o'clock in the morning, and they said, go take a shower. You got a check ride at 1 o'clock, an area check. Yeah, went to the local area. So I flew my area check, and then they said, we got a party tonight. I said, okay, but you're on alert. And at that time, they didn't, at Takhli, tell the helicopter crew when you're flying. They called you exactly 1 hour before the 105s rolled, and we had to be airborne before they would add power. But they would call you an hour before, and you had that to get up, eat breakfast, and go to the flight line, pre-flight your airplane, and get airborne.
So that was when they were sending the 105 airplanes out?
Yes.
In case you needed to pick somebody up?
Yeah. And if they were loaded so heavy that many of them ran into the barrier at the runway trying to abort. And we had pulled 3 pilots out. The people before me had pulled 3 pilots out of burning 105s. And so they would not move unless Pedro was airborne. That was our call sign. But anyway, went to this party and they were all drinking Matouche rosé wine. That's the only time I've ever seen it. About 20 bottles of it. And I said, I'm going to be getting up in 6 hours. I better not drink at all. And so they all had their party, and I went back to bed about 9 o'clock because I knew I'd be up between 3 and 4 flying. So anyway, I got the phone call, went down to the flight line, pre-flighted the airplane, and I had no co-pilot. And I said, who's the co-pilot? And they said, Lieutenant Shigehara. Well, he never showed up. So for weight and balance, you had to have somebody in the co-pilot seat. Put the medic there, one of them. And while we're up orbiting, while the 105s are taking off, I said, does this lieutenant not show up very often? And he said, far as I know, he left 6 months ago. He said, they've been drinking again. They always put him on alert. And I thought, and I said, well, where's the other pilots? And he said, sir, they all got on 141 at 3 o'clock in the morning and left. It was their time to go home, and they didn't stick around.
Wow.
So that's the way I found out. I had 3 helicopters, and I had me. I was the only pilot on the base. Eventually, 2 days later, we got a second pilot, and Don and I stuck together the whole time. But anyway, that was my initiation into rescue efficiency and personnel. It was just we were there for 80 days, the 2 pilots, before we got anybody else.
Wow.
And so we were on alert all the time, because if we flew at night, we had to have 2 pilots. Daytime, since we weren't in an active combat area, we could fly 1 pilot and 1 guy could do something else, like sleep.
What were some of the missions that happened there that you remember?
Well, they were all just 105s having problems, either battle damage, and we were there to catch them if they, the 43 had a radius of 50 miles fuel. It normally is. And so if they got within 50 miles, we worried about them. Other than that, they got from some other base.
Right.
But we had strange missions. I dried the softball field one time because they were going to have a tournament and it rained. So we hovered around and dried the field. Probably the funniest one is the RB-66 was a airborne command post and electronic jammer. And he dumped the whole chaff, which is aluminum foil from a foot long to 20 feet long bits of aluminum foil. And they said, the 105s can't take off because they'll ingest that in the engine. Can you sweep the runway? Well, yeah, we blew it all off the runway, but I came back looking like a Christmas tree. I had aluminum foil everywhere on that helicopter. But that's, while I was there, President Johnson decided he's going to visit Thailand and Vietnam. So they said, you've been tasked to move 2 airplanes, and we only had 2 pilots, to Utapao, which was south of Bangkok. And we said, well, okay, but we've got transmission changes on both. The poor mechanics worked in driving rain on those airplanes out in the open to get ready for the president. We finally got them in shape about an hour before takeoff. We took off, the 2 of us, for Dong Muang, which is the Bangkok airport, and went to Dong Muang, and we said, we need maps to get to Utapao. There are no maps. At that point, we had no maps south of Bangkok, except we had a great big base. I got to see Pattaya Beach with 2 shelter houses, and that was all. Now it looks like Miami Beach, but anyway, that's all. Got to Utapao, and they said, you're going to be tasked to deploy these 2 frogmen. And I said, okay. And so we had a meeting, and I said, well, what are you guys going to do? And they said, our job is if it goes in the water, get the president out. How do you do that? And they said, you put us over the wreckage, and we have him sitting in a particular seat. He has to sit that seat on landing because we take out the person in that seat. Oh, okay. Well, hope they don't go in the water. And we're sitting there thinking, and I said, well, which one of you gets Ladybird? Not our job. He said, anybody told Ladybird? But they were serious. But we worked, and we spent 14 days in Bangkok for the landing for the
president
and his takeoff. That was my job.
Did you see him?
Yeah. And the king and queen. We supported the king and queen 3 times. Really a lot of fun there. But Johnson was a pain in the butt.
Well, what did you do after Thailand then? Where did you go?
I came back to Shepherd, which is Wichita Falls, Texas.
Okay, so you did 1 tour over there, and that was it?
Well, no. And then I came back. I taught for 8 years.
Okay.
This gunship operation with the Hornets. That was my flight. They called us, do you remember this special the series on TV, F Troop?
Yeah.
Well, we were F Troop. We did things nobody else did because we were doing things nobody else did. We flew formation. They didn't teach that at the school. We did several gunnery. We did all these things for that particular mission, and the ones I trained went to there and then came back. And
so you were training these F Troop guys then?
Yeah.
How was that? Was that fun?
Oh, yeah. We got to do things nobody else did.
What was the coolest thing you did over there when you were doing that? The F Troop stuff?
Machine guns and rockets. You could shoot a rocket around a corner because the rocket, when it comes out of the tube, doesn't have enough speed. So it weather vanes. If you're descending, it'll go up. If you're climbing, it'll dive, or you can kick the rudder in and shoot around a corner. And the gunners didn't like us to get the Gatling guns. They told us we wasted ammunition.
So the pilot was running the guns at that point.
Well, we could.
Yeah.
We had a switch, but they wouldn't allow us to cut them out. They were good. They knew exactly when they pulled that trigger where it was going to end up. And you have to remember, as a helicopter is flying, the bullets, if you shoot out the side, go forward. They don't go back. And so you would see them curving, and they would trigger it and know exactly where it was going to hit. And it wasn't a place where they were pointing a gun.
Wow.
So it was a lot of practice, and we were flying heavyweight. For the F model, we were after over 1,000 pounds heavyweight. For the N model, we had twice the engines, so the airframe couldn't take as much as we could fly with.
Okay, so then you end up, how many years you were doing that? 7 years, you said?
I did it 8 years, eight or 9. Then I went back to Vietnam in 1974. But in 1971, we moved the school from Shepherd to Hill. And that was the ideal training because we had water, we had mountains, clearings, and everything here that you needed to throw at them.
How many pilots did you deal with during those years, would you guess?
Well, my flight was 20 guys, and they came every 12 weeks. So I don't know how many. I've never counted it up.
Wow. That's a lot.
A lot. Well, and then I would give check rides to the guys that are regular Huey pilots that were not going to the Hornets. They were going to missile site support. So it was rescue. You'd do a sling work, a hoist and stuff on a check ride. Took a little over an hour. I got an award up at the U, one of the 11, and I was the first one that's been here, and we've been trying to get him go. But anyway, the guy that presented my medallion, which is in there, was Chris Stewart, the congressman.
Yeah.
And he evidently went through helicopters after setting the world speed record in a B-1 around the world. And so it was fun to talk to him because he went over as and in Vietnam, I was the only one that's ever upgraded because I ended up going over with 3,000 hours. Everybody else came straight out of the school, and they had no training authorized in combat, so they would be a co-pilot for a year. And here's a guy that flew a Mach 2 bomber, and he's going in a 90-knot helicopter as a co-pilot, just sitting there. So and he's going to speak here. I get to introduce him. He's speaking here Memorial Day.
Oh, that's fun.
Yeah.
Okay.
So it'd be good to see him again.
Tell me about going back to Vietnam then. What did you go back doing?
I went back to Okefenokee, and at that point, the war had stopped, but we were supposedly ready to go if we had to. The problem was we had stood down over a year. So everybody with combat experience were gone. And we got people that had never been to war. And if we had gone to war, we would have been in trouble.
And where were you at over there? What base were you on?
Okefenokee. It's right up in northeast Thailand, right on the Mekong. So we developed what we called what was the operation? But anyway, they do it now as red flag, blue flag. A simulated war 3 days. Well, we knew we were really having problems with knowledge and carryover. So then we would develop a complete combat situation and simulate everything, fly the missions, and even drop bombs and shoot guns over a range. We had Shandy Range in Thailand. And that's the way we tried to keep the crews ready. Then the other job I had is we developed ops plans for evacuation, like Vietnam, Cambodia, Laos, and Thailand. And the problem was they had a plan for Saigon, but the ambassador had to open it, and he never did. So it just kind of ran helter-skelter, and you saw all the problems with airplanes landing and pushing them overboard and all of that, because we had planned it all, but they had to get started at a certain point, and
they never got started?
They never started. It just ran every which way.
Why do you suppose that is?
Well, Nixon told the ambassador, either win or come back on your shield, which is what the Romans did to the general. In other words, fight till you're dead and they carry you back on your shield. And so he was not a brave man, so he never said anything. He just left.
What's probably the scariest moment you had over there in Vietnam?
Well, I can think of one. We lost a 141 on takeoff. Brand new airplane, 4-engine, beautiful bird, ran down the runway, rotated, and it stalled and went in the water. And what happened, it had a switch said take off or land. And that was not on the checklist. They had forgotten it. And it cost us 5 guys. We got 2 out of the wreckage, but its cargo was 90 millimeter anti-aircraft. Why they had to ship it home, but they had deactivated the unit and were shipping, and it was packed in styrofoam boxes. And we were there when we scrambled. I was the first one off. I was on the 3-minute. Then the other guy came because we needed to look. But where it crashed, there was a whole lot of jet fuel. The 141 was a high wing. The wing ripped off, full of fuel. It was everywhere. And then the styrofoam, we had 50,000 pounds of ammunition packed in styrofoam. And you'd come to a hover and it was like snow. And we thought, what's this? But anyway, it was just about dark, about 10 o'clock. So we got flare ships and dropping flares. Well, when the flare burned out, your eyes were so small, you couldn't see anything. So we had them dropping the flare over about a 2.5, 3 mile and then turn around. But every 30 seconds, we burned 1,100 flares that night. What we found out that was scary was while we were down hovering around trying to find these survivors, was the flare parachutes were like hot air balloons. The flare burned out and it hovered, and they were all floating around about 50 feet above the water. And Eventually they'd go in, but we probably had any one time 20 of them hovering, and we're dodging them because they're 20-foot canopies, pretty good sized flare and you didn't want that in your rotor. And so we dodged that while we're looking for the guys. We got 2. The 5 that we didn't get, I think, as far as I know, they all drowned. And nobody had water wings on because nobody expected to go in the water.
Yeah.
What happened is in the land position, when the wheels start to slow down, then the spoilers, the things you see on the top of airliner wings, all come up vertical, and the airplane wouldn't fly.
Gosh.
And
that's terrible.
It wasn't on the checklist, so it got moved somewhere sometime.
What's the craziest thing that happened to you over there in Vietnam? It's the most memorable thing.
It didn't happen to me. It happened to a friend of mine. When Johnson was there, he was on an island with Kittikachorn, who was the premier, and he had an island. Anyway, a friend of mine flew his suit to the cleaners. Well, in Bangkok at that time, there was one dry cleaner. The president's suit never came out of the dry cleaner. And we had an international incident. All the helicopter crews got queried, and I don't know how deep they went, but, as far as how hard they pushed them. But they wanted that suit back. Why, I don't know. But
did they ever find it?
No, they never found it. We didn't have it, but Ray said, I flew it in and the dry cleaner man took it. And that's all we knew. But, why the president's suit was such a big deal, I don't know.
You said when you were over there, when you were standing by for the jets to crash or whatever, you had to be on call. One was on call for 15 minutes, and tell me about that.
We scrambled. If you were primary, you were on 3-minute takeoff, and we had what we called a fire suppression kit, 1,200 gallons of foam, and 2 firemen also. And if they went into the barrier, then the firemen went with us. We would pick up the kit and put them down. They'd paint a stripe into the cockpit. We would hover over the survivor because he's in the middle of a fire and back out and take him out. That was if he did it on the runway. If it was not on the runway, then we left the kit behind and the firemen and just went with the medics and the hoist operator. But you scrambled in 3 minutes. The day after the 141 went in, we flew all that day, both airplanes. And then Al and I were on alert that night, and we scrambled 8 or 10 times. The last time, about 3 a.m, I woke up and I was flying the airplane, and the crew chief was signaling when to land. And I thought, how'd I get out here? We had a trailer right next to the pad. And I thought, I'm not going to let the co-pilot know I don't remember when we took off. So we sat down and I told Al, you fill out the forms and I'll cock the airplane. We had a procedure so we could just hit the starter and it would all start. And he looked at me, and of course, we're sitting in the dark with red lights on because that's all you have in the dark in the airplane. I said, what's the matter? And he said, what time did we take off? I said, I have no idea, Al. I said, the first thing I remember is Russell out there. And he said, me too. And he was our operations officer. I was maintenance. And he said, I think I'll call the command post and tell them we're off alert. Because we had to ask the hoist operator where we'd been and how long. It was 35 minutes on a battle damage F4. And we had covered him, and then we're coming back into land. If he'd have bailed out, I'm not sure what would have happened. Because neither one of us were awake till we came to a hover.
Oh, my gosh.
But that's how tired you got. I could lean against the wall and fall asleep. Take a nap.
What was I going to say?
But we knew if we didn't go, nobody went. They didn't get out.
You never got shot down?
No, never got hit.
How many?
Hurt a lot, and a lot of our birds got holed, but yeah, one of ours had over 250 holes. They went in to get a crew that had been shot down.
And how many missions did you fly over there?
Well, the Air Force only counted them by days. In other words, you could scramble 15 times and you got 1 day credit. The Army counted every takeoff and landing. So they had a gazillion. I had over 300 days of combat flying. And they awarded air medals for every 25 days. And I had 9. So it was 2,500 and something days that were credited as combat. And how many scrambles you'd have to count landings, because we didn't fly any except combat or medevacs. We did fly medevacs anytime that we were available, and we wouldn't use the primary bird. We'd use the high bird. And so it could come back and refuel and get ready to go. But we had a Air Force hospital at Cameron, and so we flew people into that. In fact, the 2 survivors off the 141, we talked to them the next morning in the hospital.
On the rescues you'd go to, how often was the pilot dead versus was there somebody to rescue?
You would be lucky to get half of them. Ejection seat was a problem. The airplane crashing and then battle damage from anti-aircraft. And I had a good friend that was a helicopter pilot at Pleiku, and he had his armored vest on, but he was a big guy, and there was a gap between the front and back. And he was flying at 8,000 feet, and 150 caliber round hit him right at that seam between the two. And the co-pilot said he was just flying along and just slumped over. And they didn't hear the shot or anything. Just, it killed him. So, if it's your time, we never worried about that.
Because you couldn't do anything about it anyway.
Yeah, you had no control. So we just did our job and figured we're bulletproof.
When you came home, was it a big relief the second time? Or how did you feel about it?
The second time?
Yeah.
Well, of course, by the time I came home, they were almost out of there.
Yeah.
But when you came home the first time, you sure didn't want to go back because you knew what the conditions were. They got better later because they didn't shoot at us, but it was still, you were gone from the family and you were in and out of the jungle and everything else. So you got to remember in the helicopter, if you leave the base, you got to consider, even as civilian rescue, is it safe for us to try to auto-rotate, which was almost zero, because you're flying in the mountains or trees or rivers. So if the engine quits, you're going to crash. How bad, you don't know.
Yeah.
But that's always a calculated risk in the back of you. And the pilot's the one that decides, like the rescue 2 weeks ago. When they finally go get the guy, the last one that commits is the pilot. He decides go or no go.
Were there some rescues you went on that were the landing zone was hot that you couldn't go in? Or was mostly where you were going because they were airplanes and they travel so far from where they got shot down?
We didn't fly into LZs. We would be in a crash situation.
Yeah.
And some were, you had to wait till they sterilized the area, which is what we called it. In other words, killed everybody there.
Would that be calling in other, like Cobras or something, copters, or was that stuff done on the ground?
No, it would be fixed wing because it would be further away. We used Army maybe 5% of the time because we were away from them. But I hadn't thought about how much of the time, whether we went in or out. But there were times, one time we went out on a mission, we had an F4, 2 guys punched out in the valley. By the time we got there, the 2 beacons that the pilots had, there were 19 beacons going off in that valley. They had more than we did. And you had to check. You would send a fighter usually. Sometimes we'd use a helicopter, but not very often because we were slow and low and pretty vulnerable. But the fighters would go check each beacon and either bomb it then or, if it wasn't the pilot, then you blew it up because they were trying to get us to come in.
Right. And wow, so the beacon, everybody, is it each personal pilot had one or the plane?
They have one on their parachute and they have one in the airplane, And so he can take it with him and he'll have one. And then he also carries a survival radio. If you don't, sometimes they got him damaged in bailout or something, but he would call you and tell you who it is. Like the guy was something 44 Alpha and Bravo. That's a front and back seater. They made a movie. I'm trying to think what it was. It was a B-66 went down and the guy bailed out. He was the navigator in the back. And he used golf courses because he was navigating. We had a survival map on silk. And so I said, I'm playing the 5th hole on hill. And he knew enough.
Here, tilt that back towards your mouth. There you go.
He knew that was the headings and distance. He said, I'm playing the 5th hole of the hill times 10. In other words, 10 times the length. And they did that for, I think, 3 days and walked him to where they could
pick him up.
Wow. But he really created a problem because we were calling Europe in the middle of the night saying, you got to go out and get the actual headings on this fairway and the layout on this hole on your golf course. And they were not real very tolerant at 2 a.m, except we would say, you want to talk to the 4-star? He's right here. And no one wanted to talk. They just went out, but that's the way we got him out.
Wow.
And we've done other things. But he moved 15 miles probably.
How often did you ever come across the enemy out there? Did you see him very much?
No, we didn't. They stayed pretty well hidden unless you would know they're there when they shoot at you. But no, they didn't. We never saw, you saw a lot of locals, but not, and there may have been VC.
Yeah. Do you feel like when you came home, you feel like you brought some PTSD with you, or?
No. I've never had that problem.
Man, your memory is so good, dude. You're so sharp. It's crazy.
I'm going to write a book for my grandkids. Those two things there.
Yeah, that's a great idea.
About 75 civilian rescues. I just leave out the Air Force ones.
Okay, bring me home. Talk to me about what you did after you got out and some of these rescues.
Okay, you mean I got out of the Air Force?
Oh, well, when you came home, I know you stayed in, didn't you?
Yeah.
Yeah, when you came home from Vietnam the second time,
well,
where'd you go?
Came home. I went to Shepherd, which was at Wichita Falls, and I instructed the Hornet pilots, F Troop, for 7 or 8 years. Then we moved to Hill, and I did it for a year here. Then I went back to Vietnam, then back here. And at that point, the wing commander called me, and Dale called me and said, do you want to stay here and run a rescue unit? We're moving to New Mexico. And I said, I didn't lose a thing in Albuquerque. And so I stayed here as a commander for 2 years. And we were a MAST unit, which was even busier than working in SAC. MAST was...
What does that stand for?
Military Assistance to Safety and Transportation. What it authorized the military to do is support the local sheriff with helicopters. And we had none here.
You had none as in no helicopters?
No, we had no civilian.
Okay.
Airmen and Lifeline come in after we were operational for 2 years.
This is like 76, something like that?
Yeah, so we flew our regular support, which was building the electronic bomb range out on, and it's solar powered and everything else. But we would fly one MAST bird, and we flew everywhere. We were authorized to go out 350-mile radius, so we went as far as Yellowstone, Laramie, Page, Arizona, or Elko. And we had the responsibility of everybody that got in trouble.
What's some of your most memorable rescues doing that?
Here?
Yeah.
I know some crazy ones, but...
Yeah, those crazy's good.
And while I was at Shepherd, I also... they wanted experienced Huey, Air Force Huey pilot. We went to Tonopah, Nevada for 30 days, and I ended up photobird over a 1 megaton weapon that they were testing underground, which was a little disconcerting. But anyway, here, I don't know. I'd have to think about it. We went out. We did everything. Well, for example, my unit had been a rescue, Air Force rescue unit for 2 days, and Teton Dam broke. And so we were there at Teton Dam. And the one mistake we made is we had no water wings or flotation for the pilots because we didn't know what we were going to. They just scrambled us. My ops officer who grew up in, not Randolph, what's the one in Idaho, southern Idaho?
Pocatello or?
No, a smaller town about halfway to Pocatello. Just north of Logan.
Preston, yeah.
Yeah. He grew up in Preston. And so we were getting our master's degree on base on a Saturday, and the beeper went off, and so he went, and then I would have to go and launch him. In other words, wave goodbye. We only had 4 pilots and 2 airplanes to start with. So he went off, and then somebody motioned me come out, and he was on the phone, and I said, "What's up?" And he said, "Do you have a flight suit?" And I said, "I'm not on alert. You are." I said, "Is your co-pilot sick?" And he said, because all 4 of us were getting our master's degree. He said, "No." He said, "But on my other ear, I have a phone, and it's the governor of Idaho, the governor of Utah, the general, and the National Command Center, which is in Washington. And the general at Hill said, I'll send every helicopter I got." And he said, "Oh," he said, "and we only got 2, and you're the only other guy flying." So we came over the hill at Rexburg, and it looked like Lake Erie. And when I've talked to him before we left, he said, "Can't be very big." He said, "I grew up in Preston. I never heard of the place." He said, "It must be a little dirt dam." And I said, "Okay." I come over the hill, and I said, "Kennard, where'd all the water come from?" And he said, "Dam was bigger than I thought." 300 feet tall.
Yeah, if you ever drive up, it's still.
Yeah,
it's
I've
crazy
got
how tall it is.
pictures of the water coming out of it.
Oh my gosh!
And a bulldozer falling into the water. Yeah, we spent all day that day till, well, we went to bed at 10 o'clock, and we had to get up. I had to get up at 3, and because the Army had a bunch of helicopters at Snow College, parked in this big empty field, but they had no radio. The emergency radio was gasoline powered, and it only ran for 10 hours. And of course, then it got surrounded by water, so the radio didn't work. And Kennard, in the middle of the night, they said, "We got to have you fly doctors and X-ray and nurses in. They've been on duty for 24 hours. And so at midnight, he flew some, and the president of the bank. We thought, why has he got priority? Well, they had moved everything in the safety deposit boxes in his basement.
Wow.
The problem was his wife didn't know that, and she opened the basement up for flood victims.
Oh, my gosh.
And so he wasn't sure the safety deposit boxes
We're still
were there.
safe, yeah.
But I flew in that first daylight, and we landed on, if you know Rexburg, there's a old volcano with an R on it.
Yeah.
Well, we landed on the top. That's where the radio was. And there was water all around. We landed, and this guy came running out of the bushes and jumped in the helicopter. Found out he was the one that took gasoline and started the generator. And then he couldn't get off the mountain. And he was going to get on that helicopter come hell or high water.
How long were we up there working the dam?
We worked 2 days, and then by then the Idaho Guard had their helicopters, and rescue pulled us back. But we were, for 2 days, we were the only thing there.
So all told, how many years did you fly helicopters?
From 59 to 78. What's that, 19 years? 19 years.
You love it?
Yeah.
Was it funner in the end than flying the planes?
Oh, it always was. And when you brought somebody in the door, of course, you could see them right here. The look on their face, whether you hoisted them out or landed and let them in, was worth training for a year. It was just the look of them relieving. You're getting like Paul was. He had punched out in Laos and got to spend about 3 or 4 hours there before they got him.
A lot of satisfaction out of that.
Yeah. Tremendous satisfaction. And we got the same thing with the civilian rescues.
That's funny because one of the dust-off pilots I talked to, he just said how useful helicopters are in that sense, just in a way that...
It was not as personal for them. They just landed and they put litters in and you took off.
Yeah. But I mean in the sense that a helicopter can just go places and do things that are really unusual, really useful for that kind of thing.
Oh, there's no way you can do a lot of things. And the old H-43, when I went to Cheyenne, we had the first 3 in the Air Force, and we crashed 2 of them in 4 months because we didn't know. We had maintenance problems. Mine was a checklist problem, and what we tried, and and then they retracted the gear on the third one, which was pilot error. But there's some things you do with a helicopter that you can't do with anything else.
Yeah, that's some good stories, my friend. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Appreciate it. If you or someone that you know isn't getting the VA benefits that you've earned, please click this link. We've teamed up with a group of experts that can help veterans build stronger VA claims and get the benefits they deserve. Please click this link for a free consultation.